You know, every political party has a rulebook, a sort of instruction manual that dictates everything from its core beliefs to who even gets to join. So today, we're going to crack open the official constitution for New Zealand first and really see what makes them tick. So let's dive right in. You see, a document like this, it's so much more than just a dry list of rules. Think of it as the party's blueprint. It defines their core beliefs, their entire structure, and, who gets to be on the team. It's basically the party's DNA. Okay, so to really make sense of this rule book, we've got to first understand the party itself, right? So let's start at the beginning with its origins and what the Constitution says it stands for. And right at the beginning, the Constitution grounds the party in a really specific moment in time, 1993. It says New Zealand First was basically formed as a direct response to those huge economic reforms of the 1980s. The whole idea was to give a voice to Kiwis who were, pretty concerned about the direction the country was heading. And this is where we start to see how the party wants to be seen. The Constitution actually goes out of its way to avoid any rigid ideology. Instead, it defines its approach as, and I'm quoting here, pragmatic, common-sense decision-making from the center. The whole stated goal? To find balance and stability by steering clear of what it calls an ideology of extremism. So the party's entire focus is guided by what the Constitution calls its 5 main pillars. These have apparently been the bedrock of its efforts since way back in '93, and they cover a pretty wide range of stuff, everything from democracy and the economy to national sovereignty and even what it terms pragmatic environmentalism.
All right, so those are the 5 big picture pillars. But let's go a bit deeper, shall we? Let's look at the specific original ideas the party was actually built on.
The Constitution is super clear about this. It says the party was founded on exactly 15 fundamental principles. And listen, these aren't just vague suggestions. They're described as the absolute foundation of the party's entire policy program. And let me tell you, these principles get really specific. Just take a look at principle number 2. This isn't some vague statement. It's a hard target. It says Parliament will be reduced to 80 members and the number of government advisors will be cut by over 50%. That points directly to a focus on a much leaner, less costly government. Here's another great example that really draws a line in the sand. Principle number 12. It just says, strategic state asset sales will cease. That's it. A super definitive stance on keeping key national resources in public hands. And just to give you one more example, have a look at Principle 13. It calls for establishing an independent anti-corruption commission. This really shows that a focus on government accountability was, baked into the party's DNA right from the very start. Okay, so we've seen the what and the why behind the party's founding ideas. Now let's get into the how. This next bit is all about the internal nuts and bolts, the governance and the actual structure of the party. So, the Constitution starts with the absolute basics. The name? New Zealand First. The colours? Black and white. Simple enough. But then, boom, it cuts right to the chase, right to the heart of the power structure. It defines the board as the controlling body of the party. You could say this is the real engine room. And believe me, the board's powers are extensive. Just look at this list, pulled straight from the Constitution. It controls the money, the staff, all the legal decisions. It can even delegate its own functions and make new rules. This really shows you just how central the board is to the party's entire operation. All right, let's switch gears and talk about the people. How does someone actually become a member of New Zealand First? And just as important, what does it take to get kicked out or to leave? So let's start with the first question. How do you join? Well, the Constitution lays out a pretty clear 4-step process for anyone who wants to become a member. Okay, so you apply, you give your details, you pay the annual fee, but that last step, that's the crucial one. You have to wait for the board to approve you. And get this, the Constitution gives the board absolute discretion in deciding who gets in. That means they have the final say, and they don't have to explain their decision to anyone. Now, what about the flip side? How does your membership end? Well, you can always resign. That's simple enough. But what's really interesting is what happens if you join another political party. If you do that, your membership is, poof, automatically terminated. No hearing, no discussion, nothing. For other stuff like conduct the board decides is offensive, well, you could get terminated for that too, but at least you get a formal hearing first. So let's pull all of this together. Why does a document like this even matter? Well, it turns out a party's constitution is probably a lot more important than you might think. Because at the end of the day, a constitution like this one is way more than just a rule book. It really is the political DNA of the party. It defines what it stands for, who holds the power, and who gets to be a part of the club. It shapes the party's identity and pretty much guides its every move. And all this leaves us with a final, kind of broader question, doesn't it? For New Zealand First, or really for any political party, how much does a founding document, something written years, sometimes decades ago, still shape its choices in the super fast-moving world of modern politics? Now, that is something worth thinking about.